What's up, guys? Gary here, back with yet another story thought, a little adventure for us to go on together. So before we get in, though, before we dive into it, we've got our notes, we've got our Bible, we've got our hat. That's right, we've got an intro. Alright, guys, so today I wanted to talk about what's your baseline, right? What's your baseline? That's something you might hear, but really what people are asking when they say that is, what is your perspective? Where are you coming from? What do you stand on? So when we say what's your baseline, what we're really saying is, what do you stand on, right? I think that's something important for us, especially in today's age where everybody has an opinion about everything and everybody thinks that what they say is important and that you need to hear them. It's really necessary to know where somebody's coming from, where their baseline is, and where it is in relation to your baseline. Because when you hear what somebody says, you're going to evaluate it against your perspective, your grounding, your level, right? So when we talk about perspective, when we talk about grounding, we talk about where you're coming from, what we're really talking about is, what are your values? What's important to you? What moral values do you have? Where is your thinking at? And so the first stop here on our little journey is that this idea that what's important to you is what you're going to invest your time into. So what you put your time into really shows what's valuable to you, right? I think we can all agree that what you put time into, you find valuable. So that's point one. And really the thought there is, if you don't know what's valuable to you, look at where you're putting your time, right? Are you reading books, watching movies, drawing, creative things, writing? Like, it could be anything, social media, Facebook, photography, whatever it is. Just look at what you're putting your time into. Relationships with people, perhaps, cooking. Possibilities are endless, but the point is, what you put your time into is what's important to you. It's what you're investing in, and that shows what's valuable to you. And so the next stop on our little journey here is that what's valuable to you, what's important to you, is going to shape your thinking, right? And that makes sense too, right? That what you're spending time in, that's where your head's going to be. That's where your thinking's going to be. That's where you're going to default to. So when you see problems, you're going to relate them to something that something that you is ingrained in you. It's kind of like muscle memory, where the more time you spend in something, the easier the reaction to it becomes. That's where we're going with this. So what's valuable to you shapes your thinking. And so now we get to kind of bringing it back to the baseline for a second. The point is, it's really hard to have a baseline, right? Grounding, foundation, that's a solid, good, grounding, if your values, what you spend time on, is in the opposite direction. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're spending all of your time reading romance novels, for example, it's going to be hard to have a firm grounding for a guy if you spend all of your time reading, watching, and inundating yourself with violent culture. It's probably going to be hard to have a completely stable grounding. If you spend all of your time, looking and watching things that you shouldn't be doing, or that don't build you up, they don't edify you, they don't, improve you, it's going to be harder to have that baseline, right? So we're going to read a couple scriptures. The first one's going to be Colossians 2:8. So give me a second here. By the way, I love these little flag thingies. They help so much. Whoever invented them needs an award. And, well, let's be honest, they probably got one. But anyway, so we're going to talk about Colossians 2:8 for a second, and then we're going to move on to the next step in our journey. So Colossians 2:8, I'm reading out of the Message. You can read out of any Bible you want, honestly. I just like the Message because it paraphrases and makes it a little bit easier to understand. Is it always 100% accurate? Probably not. The intent, though, is to get the message across, which is what I think it does a pretty good job at. So, Colossians 2:8. Watch out for people who try to dazzle you with big words and intellectual double talk. sounds a lot like politics right now, to be honest, right? Everybody is trying to sound smart in politics, which it's kind of funny because most of them don't sound smart at all. They want to drag you off into endless arguments, comment sections, right? That sounds normal, right? They want to drag you off into endless arguments that never amount to anything. How relevant is that? Think about it. Anytime you post to social media and you post an opinion that somebody doesn't like and they comment and then you comment back and you comment, it doesn't change anybody's opinion. It doesn't provide any fruit. There is no product that comes out of that. It's just an endless argument that makes no sense. Anyway, moving on. They spread their ideas through empty traditions of human beings and the empty superstitions of spirit beings. But that's not the way of Christ. Everything of God gets expressed in him, so you can see and hear him clearly. You don't need a telescope, a microscope, or a horoscope to realize the fullness of Christ and the emptiness of the universe without him. When you come to him, the fullness comes together for you too. His power extends over everything. Okay, so that's Colossians 2:8 and a little bit further. And really, right, what I want to get out of that is a couple of things, but really it's that when you're spending your time on things that are empty and they're just designed to dazzle you, or when you spend your time on endless arguments, right, it's not building you up in your baseline, isn't getting fortified, it's not getting, built on. But if you build it on God, it's a firm, solid foundation. When you build your baseline on God, you know that your moral compass is set right. When you build it on God, you know you're going in the right direction. So bringing kind of us full circle here, if what we spend our time on is what's valuable to us shapes our thinking, what shapes our thinking really is our baseline, the question is, are you spending time with God? Right? Because if you follow that train of thought, if you're spending time with God, it means that God is valuable to you. If God is valuable to you, it means that God's going to shape your thinking. And if God shapes your thinking, it means that he's going to be your baseline. So the question here is, do you treat God like you'd treat a friend that you're spending time with? Do you treat God and your relationship with God like you do your best friend who you call and talk to, or you text, or you FaceTime, right? Do you spend time with God? If you do, right, and this is something we all are working on, so there's no judgment here, because believe me, sometimes I find it hard to read a single verse a day, even when I have an app that pops it up on my phone and says, read me. It's so easy just to swipe it aside and run on with my day, because everything is busy and everything is demanding your attention and everything seems so important, right? It seems so valuable. But is it really valuable? So my thought for you, what I would like you to think about, is that sometimes it's easy, most of the time, it's easy for us to get caught up in the hustle and the bustle and just the craziness, the intellectual double talk of the world and what's going on. If you look at the news, anything, it's going to pull you in, and usually it's to an endless argument that does no good. So instead of spending hours on something that has questionable value, can we spend a few minutes on something that has real, definite value? So next time when you're thinking about, let me mindlessly scroll through Instagram, let me mindlessly scroll through Facebook, let me check that next group, let me refresh my favorite website, maybe read that one verse and just think about it for a second. Cool. So here's the question, right, that we've been dancing around, that we've talked a little bit. It's, where are you setting your baseline? Are you setting your baseline on God, or are you setting your baseline on something else? Because if you're setting your baseline on God, you'll be able to look in your life and see those steps that we talked about building up to it. If you're setting your baseline on something else, unintentionally, you're going to see the steps leading up to how your baseline got there. And if your baseline isn't where you want it to be, start making those choices, those decisions, those steps to get you where you want to be. So that brings us to our second verse, our last verse for this little talk, which is in James 1:5. So again, little flippy guy here. There we go. James 1:5 before we close. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. You'll get his help and won't be condescended to when you ask for it. Ask boldly, believing without a second thought. People who worry their prayers are like wind-whipped waves. Don't think you're going to get anything from the Master that way, adrift at sea, keeping all of your options open. Right, so what does that say? That says that if you don't know how to set your baseline, right, you just know that it's not where you want it exactly, but you don't know how to set it correctly. You don't know how to start making those first decisions. Just ask God. He's going to put people in your path. He's going to put things in your way that help you set that baseline if you say yes. So that's our thought for today, guys. So if any of this resonates with you, like, comment, subscribe, all the jazz. But feel free to come back because we're going to keep talking about this in the next one and the next one and the next one. So thank you guys, and we'll talk to you later.